Ahoy there, my children of the watch. I love that I could now say children of the watch. I guess I could always say that, but especially now that we've got Mandalorian. Ahoy there, my children of the watch. Welcome to Star Wars Transmission's weekly Q&A. I'm your boy Dan, and we've got some great questions to dive. For our first question, Tyler Watts asks, does Rex find out Ahsoka lives after her battle with Vader on Malachor? I wanted to open with this question because I love me some Ahsoka Tano, and there's a chance that we may get to see Ahsoka during this season of The Mandalorian, which would be so dope. We've already seen her appear in The Mandalorian, so getting her to see her again would be great. At the bare minimum, I love Ahsoka, so let's talk about it. Does Rex find out that Ahsoka survived her duel with Darth Vader on Mandalore? I think yes, and I really hope so, but we sadly don't know at this time. Myself and many Star Wars fans, I think we would love to see Ahsoka and Rex reunite at some point after Rex last saw her during Season 2 of Rebels. So for those of you who have not seen Rebels before, or if you haven't seen Rebels, it's been in some time, it's been a minute since you've seen Rebels, the question that Tyler asked is referring to specifically Season 2, the Twilight of the Apprentice arc of that season, and it was the last two episodes, the finale of that season, which is spectacular. So in that 2-episode arc, we get it's taking place in 3 BBY. Ahsoka Tano, Kanan Jarrus, Ezra Bridger, they travel to the outer rim planet of Malachor. Yoda tells them that, hey, to defeat the Sith, you have to travel to this planet, Malachor. And when they get to Malachor, they find a Sith Temple / super weapon that was created by an ancient Sith. Oh, and I'm drawing a blank on the Sith's name. Is it Darth Tanis? Oh, I'm drawing a blank on the Sith's name. But anyway, they get to Malachor. They find this Sith Temple / super weapon. They then encounter several Inquisitors before Darth Vader arrives and all hell breaks loose. Ahsoka and Vader then duel, and we get one of my all-time favorite moments in Star Wars. Guys, I can't even begin to tell you how much I love Ahsoka's duel with Darth Vader in Rebels. It's so spectacular. Like when I have friends that have not watched that are fans of Star Wars, have not watched any of the cartoons, one of the examples I'll say, hey, this is why you have to watch the cartoons. I'll specifically mention Rebels and what we see happen in Season 2. I don't spoil anything for them, but yeah, I absolutely love Ahsoka's duel with Vader on Malachor. And really those 2 episodes, there's just so much great moments that we get in those 2 episodes. Now, before we go any further, I should mention that when Ahsoka, Kanan, and Ezra, they were leaving for Malachor, right? So Yoda tells them, hey, you want to defeat the Sith, you got to go to Malachor. They're getting ready to go on this journey to this planet. Rex actually reaches out to them. So he reaches out to Ahsoka and he offers to join them on their journey to Malachor. And he's worried about their travels to this planet. And we find out that prior to the fall of the Republic and the fall of the Jedi, that the Jedi were told never to travel to Malachor because of old legends about the planet. And that's why Rex is reaching out to her. Ahsoka declines Rex's offer. And then her, Ezra, and Kanan, they travel to Malachor. Ahsoka survives her encounter with Vader only because this is where it gets wild. Is able to access what was called the world between worlds. He saw Ahsoka dueling Vader, and then he pulled her into that realm, into the world between worlds. And for those that are unfamiliar with the world between worlds, it was a mystical plane within the Force that served as a collection of doors and pathways, essentially existing in between time and space, linking all moments of time together. That's like the weird Star Wars stuff that I am here for, man. Like when I distinctly remember watching the World Between Worlds episode with Danielle and we were literally like floored watching that episode just because it's amazing and it's the weird type of stuff that I love about Star Wars. And so Ezra accesses the World Between Worlds, right? And he pulls her into his timeline, which is 0BBY. Before he pulls her into his timeline, he's seeing her BBY. He pulls Ahsoka right to safety, moments before Vader is going to basically kill Ahsoka. And so after Ezra saved Ahsoka, he pulls her into the World Between Worlds. Ahsoka wound up returning back to Malachor, so she returns back to her own timeline of 3BBY, and we see her at the very end of the season 2 the season 2 finale of Rebels. We see her travel into this like dark tunnel, and after that point, until we see her in the series finale of Rebels, we are not entirely sure what happens to her. And so here you could see that's Ahsoka traveling onto Malachor, and she travels into this tunnel on the planet. Hello, people. Welcome to the channel. People ask, do you think Mando will take over Ahsoka Tano? Nah. I don't think that'll happen. But now, going back to what I was discussing, we see Ahsoka go into this tunnel, and we don't see her appear again in Rebels until the finale. We do know, at least to some extent, what happened from when we last see her in the finale of season 2 to when we last see her in the series finale of Rebels. Darth Chicken, welcome to the chat, talking about Ahsoka Tano. So I love these cards. They are a series of cards that Topps produced. The artwork was created by Dave Filoni, and when they released this series of cards, there was information provided on the backs of each of these cards. And so basically, Dave Filoni made this awesome artwork for this card series, and he gave some really great information about what happened to Ahsoka after we see her travel into this dark tunnel on Malachor. So in this card series that we see her on Malachor, she eventually found a stream and the convor Morai waiting for her. Ahsoka then entered the stream and followed Morai to another portal into the World Between Worlds. She stepped into that portal and then embarked on a spiritual. We have no clue what happened to her after that. We have no clue what happened to her once she went into the World Between Worlds. And we have no clue what made her, or that changed her life. Now, for those of you that are unfamiliar with Morai, that convor that I mentioned, Morai is that bird that you've seen. We saw it in season 2 of Rebels when we see Ahsoka appear. She has appeared multiple times in Star Wars Rebels. I'm sorry, in Mandalorian, season 2 of The Mandalorian. Morai appears in that episode. Morai appeared multiple times in Rebels. I believe she appeared at the end of the Clone Wars, the finale of the Clone Wars, and she appears multiple times throughout the Clone Wars as well. Morai was this female convor who was basically like a manifestation of the daughter, and the daughter was a Force god from Mortis. And so during the Mortis arc in the Clone Wars, in the season 3 of Clone Wars, the daughter winds up sacrificing herself to save Ahsoka, and then after that point, we start to see Morai popping up as Ahsoka's like ride or die. And so many people have theorized that, hey, Morai is basically an incarnation of the daughter, or reincarnation of the daughter, and she's basically kind of like Ahsoka's homegirl, which I think is pretty cool. Spiritual journey in the World Between Worlds. The next time that Star Wars fans get to see her is, as I mentioned, in the series finale of Rebels. in that episode, we get this incredible scene, absolutely incredible scene where Sabine is speaking and she's explaining that, hey, we need to go and we need to bring Ezra back. He and Ezra, we got to bring him back home. And then we see Ahsoka the White pop up and appear. And it was widely believed that that scene was taking place in 5 ABY, so 5 years after the Battle of Yavin, and that Ahsoka and Sabine were going to go on this journey. They were going to find Ezra, they were going to bring him back home, and probably find Thrawn as well. And well, now what's dope is we're probably going to be seeing that in the upcoming Ahsoka series. So, as I mentioned, it was widely believed that that final scene in Rebels was taking place in 5 ABY, but now Dave Filoni came out, was it last in season 2 of The Mandalorian, because her Montrails, so her, or is it are they Leku? I think for Togrutas, those are Montrails, and for Twi'lek, they're called Leku. So I'm going to say Montrails. You notice the length of them. They're shorter than in The Mandalorian than they are here in the finale of Rebels. And so Dave Filoni said, hey, maybe this scene in Rebels takes place a little bit further along in the Star Wars timeline than people initially thought. Maybe it didn't take place in 5 ABY. Maybe it's taking place in 8 to 9 ABY, or maybe even a little bit beyond that, because the Ahsoka series should be taking place right around 8 to 9 ABY, which is that same time frame that The Mandalorian is taking place in. And basically all these live action Disney Plus series at this point, they're all taking place right around that like 8 to 9 ABY time period. So as I mentioned, the Ahsoka series is rumored to be delving into Sabine and Ahsoka's time looking for Thrawn and Ezra. For anyone who has yet to watch the premiere of season 3 of The Mandalorian, we just got a dope inclusion of Purgil in chapter 17 of The Mandalorian, which I was like so pumped about, which makes it even more likely that we're going to be getting Ahsoka and Sabine searching for Ezra and Thrawn. So at the bare minimum, I think that we're going to see Ahsoka Sabine searching for Ezra, and I'm hoping that we may get an explanation as to what the heck Ahsoka was up to, because we don't specifically know what happened to Ahsoka during that 8-year period from 3 BBY when we see her on Malachor to possibly 5 ABY, depending upon when the finale, that final scene in Star Wars Rebels takes place. If that final scene takes place, as Dave Filoni suggested, 8 to 9 ABY, we're talking about a 12-year gap in Ahsoka's story from 3 BBY all the way to 9 ABY. So there's a lot of timeline in Ahsoka's story that could be filled in the Ahsoka series. And I say this all to say that, hey, although we don't know specifically what happened to Ahsoka, there's a very good chance that she could have reunited with Rex during that time period. Or if she didn't, that we could see them reunite in the upcoming Ahsoka series. I love Ahsoka and Rex's relationship. I love that they really formed, and we got to see that bond and that friendship really form in the Clone Wars, from when we first are introduced to those two characters in the Clone Wars animated film, to their time in the Clone Wars series, all the way up to the finale of the Clone Wars, just how much of a bond that those two developed during that time period. Then to be able to get to spend more time with those two in Rebels, it was really special. Their friendship, their bond is probably one of my favorites in all of Star Wars. I love how much those two just genuinely care about each other as friends. And so I say this because I really think it would be awesome. It'd be special to be able to see Rex and Ahsoka reunite again. And I would kind of be blown away if we got to see it in live action, to be quite honest with you. Getting Tamir Morrison to play a live action Rex and get to see him and Rosario Dawson portray Ahsoka in live action, and getting to see those two characters reunite for the first time on screen would be super, super special. I know I would love it. I'm sure many Star Wars fans would love that as well. So either way, I think at the bare minimum, Rex had to have at some point learned that Ahsoka survived. Had to have. And I'm hoping that that's something that we will get to see at some point. I would take it in this Ahsoka series. I'll take it in a book. I'll take it in a comic. I don't care. Just as long as we get to see those two reuniting again. Rex finding out that Ahsoka survived her trip to Mandalore, because remember in Rebels, and for those of you that haven't watched it before, Kanan, Ezra, Ahsoka, they go to Malachor. They encounter Darth Vader. They barely make it out alive. Kanan and Ezra travel back to Chopper Base on Atollon, and they have to tell the Ghost Crew and Rex that, bro, Ahsoka didn't make it. And so at that point, Rex is assuming that Ahsoka has died. So for him to be able to find that hey, she did not die, she survived, and bro, she's had a glow up. Our Ahsoka the White is looking awesome. So yeah, I would love to see that, and I think many Star Wars fans would also like to see that moment as well. Love that question. That was an excellent question. Amir Razak asks, if Plagueis and Palpatine never tried to manipulate the Force and push it towards the dark side, would Anakin have not been created by the Force? This is an excellent question. Bullrun, my man, welcome to the chat. So Amir's question refers to something that specifically happened in Legends, in the Legends Darth Plagueis novel. And so in that novel, Plagueis and Sidious, they began saturating the galaxy with dark side energies. Basically, they're trying to pour as much of the dark side as they can. And this was happening in roughly 42 BBY, which was right around the time when Anakin was born. So the two of them, they hoped that they could tip the scales of balance in the Force in favor of the dark side. So they're hoping that, hey, let's pour as much dark side energy as we can into the galaxy. Let's tip the scales in favor of the dark side. And on top of that, those two were also attempting to will a being of their own design into creation as they did this. And so they're pouring all their malicious intent, all of their malice and hatred and pain. They're pouring all of their dark side energy into waves through the Force, and hoping that it spreads throughout the galaxy. And again, hoping that it's not only going to tip the scales of balance, but that they're also going to be able to will a being into creation. Now, at the time, Plagueis and Sidious, they figured that their efforts were for naught, that what they were doing did not work out. Flash forward 10 years, and now during the Naboo crisis of 32 BBY, so the invasion of Naboo, Plagueis and Sidious, they both become aware of Anakin Skywalker. They learn about this highly Force-sensitive being who had been born right around the time that those two had saturated the galaxy with the dark side. But again, not at the exact same. When they were saturating the galaxy with the dark side, that was in 42 BBY. Anakin was born in 41 BBY. I was actually just reading this today as a quick aside. In Revenge of the Sith, and when Lucas was writing Revenge of the Sith, he actually, in the script, had originally wrote that Sidious had, because of his machinations, had been responsible for the birth of Anakin Skywalker. He removed that from the script, and my guess is that information was given to people in Lucasfilm, or people at Lucasfilm had access to that information, and then, oh my God, who is Tim Lucero? Is it Tim Lucero that wrote Plagueis? I think it's Tim Lucero or James Lucero. I know the last name is Lucero, the author of Darth Plagueis. My guess is he probably got that information from someone at Lucasfilm, and they're like, yeah, you can kind of allude to it in the novel, because the novel does not specifically state that Plagueis and Sidious are Anakin's fathers, or that they created Anakin, what winds up happening is that Plagueis, essentially the Force, because of what Plagueis and Sidious were doing, the Force willed Anakin to be born as a way to fight back against the increasingly growing dark side that was consuming the galaxy at that time. Right? So the same thing could be said with Leia and Luke, right? It's no coincidence that just as Darth Sidious and Darth Vader topple the Republic and they destroy the Jedi Order, we get the birth of Luke and Leia, two powerful light side users. Luke's going to go on to become a Jedi Master and a very strong and powerful light side Force user. Leia herself is a strong Force user, and for a time is going to be a Jedi. But even still, right, she had a big hand in toppling the Empire, right? So it's not a coincidence that those two were born pretty much at the exact same moment that we see Sidious and Vader's rise to galactic dominance. So with Anakin, the Force is willing Anakin into existence as a way to combat that increasing dark side that was covering and consuming the galaxy at that point. I'm going to share this quote for you because I love this. So according to Dave Filoni, the Force naturally exists in balance in the Star Wars galaxy. So that balance is thrown out of whack when someone in the galaxy essentially does something bad or commits an act that we'd associate with the dark side. So I kind of paraphrased Dave Filoni's quote, but that essentially is what coming from Dave Filoni, who got that from George Lucas. And so basically what that means is for the Force to be in balance, the galaxy would have to be in a state of peace and harmony. So the Force at all times is operating, trying to bring the galaxy and the universe, we'll say, into a state of peace and harmony so that the Force is in balance. I say this because even if Plagueis and Sidious, in Legends, they don't pour their dark side energies into the galaxy, right? And the Force doesn't fight back as a way to, the Force doesn't will Anakin to be born because of it. Just the fact that the Sith are around doing shady shit and are trying to topple the Republic, trying to topple the Jedi, that would have resulted in the Force doing something in an attempt to bring the galaxy back into balance and back into a state of harmony. So maybe, let's say Anakin isn't born, right? Maybe the Force doesn't specifically will Anakin to be born. I think that even if that was the case, a different being would have been willed into existence, or multiple beings would have been willed into existence as a way to combat both Sidious, Plagueis, and fight the Sith and the growing dark side that was consuming the galaxy at that point. Just because of how powerful powerful Sidious and Plagueis were, I think that no matter what would have happened, the Force would have been working to been able to fight those two. But my thought would be that, hey, even if Plagueis and Sidious don't pour the dark side into the galaxy, Anakin's still going to get born, just because there's going to need to be someone that's going to help bring the Force back into balance. So Bull Run states Bendu basically not entirely, because Bendu, according to Bendu, so Bendu, for those unfamiliar with Bendu, he is a character from Rebels, and so the term Bendu is actually from Legends, or originated in Legends, I should say. And in Star Wars Rebels, this character Bendu, he's like a Force being, and he operates in the middle between light and good. And so he won't help the Jedi. Well, he does help, even though he's like, yeah, I'm the person in the middle. I'm the Bendu. I'm not supposed to really pick one side or the other. He kind of does in Star Wars Rebels. He's basically helping Kanan and Ezra. And does Ahsoka meet Bendu in Rebels? It's been a hot minute since I've watched Rebels, and I can't remember. but Bendu he's operating in the middle. So I wouldn't say that Bendu is necessarily in a representation of balance. You could say kind of, but according to Bendu, hey, he could maybe touch on the dark side or operate in the dark side, which we kind of see him do, right? Think about in the finale of, I think it's the finale of season 3. Yes, season 3 finale of Rebels. The Empire, Thrawn, they find Chopper base on Atollon and they attack it. And so Bendu is caught up in this fight and goes ham, goes crazy. And he starts shooting lightning. He starts just generating lightning and is shooting it at Thrawn and the Empire. We very much associate lightning with the Sith, right? So I don't think Bendu is necessarily going to be like a representation of the Force being in balance. Bendu was basically just saying like, hey, I operate in the middle. I'm not Sith. I'm not Jedi. I don't necessarily only operate within the light side. I don't necessarily only operate with or use the dark side, I should say. I'm going to be in the middle, where the Force being in balance is going to be different. The idea of the Force being in balance is, hey, there is peace, there is harmony. That's the Force being in balance. I love the quote of Dave Filoni saying this, and I can't remember where he said it. I wound up Googling it the other day, and I was reading, and I was just like, man, that's such a great quote. So Bull Run disagrees with me. I can, hey, that's fine if you disagree with me. I can be okay with that. To me, like I said, because of the fact that Bendu is kind of, he's not necessarily a light side user. He's not necessarily a dark side user. He's just somewhere in the middle. I would say that he's not necessarily a representation of the Force being in balance. But I love the Bendu. I'm hoping that I would love to see Bendu again. I love when Star Wars gets weird, and Bendu is a perfect example. Like, you talk to someone and you try to explain them to the Bendu, explain what the Bendu is to them. It almost sounds crazy. It almost sounds cuckoo, right? Like, hey, it's this Force being, Force entity that like kind of just lives. Like, I guess he's eternal. I don't freaking know. He can't be killed. And he just kind of does his own thing. He's not a Sith. He's not a Jedi. I love that he's just like, it's just like the weird side of Star Wars that I really love. And I think it'd be dope if we got to see Bendu appear again in Ahsoka. That would be dope. But that's a good question and a good conversation. I like talking about Rebels, and I like talking about Bendu. I hope we get to see more of Bendu, because we haven't seen him, at least as far as I know, we haven't seen him since he dipped out in season 3 of Rebels. All right, let's move on to our next question. So Matt asks, how complicated is it to remove engines from one starfighter and place it into another? Adding to that, are there any examples of this happening in lore? Yes, there are. But first, let's talk about it. So, how hard would this be? My thought is that it would be just like in the real world, right? It would be a complicated and difficult task. Any sort of mechanical task for someone that doesn't know what they're doing is going to be complicated and difficult. And I think even if you are mechanically inclined, if you are someone that works on cars in the real world, or if you're in the Star Wars galaxy and you work on engines, this still would probably be somewhat of a challenge. But there's a couple of things to keep in mind with this question. So in Star Wars, there are 3 different types of engines, or thrusters as you'll hear them called as well. You've got repulsor lifts, and those basically are what are going to make starships and speeders hover in the air, right? So we see a speeder hovering in the air as it's going, as someone's driving it. That's the repulsor lift engine that's making it hover. We've got sublight engines, and those are going to be the engines that allow a starship to travel at sub light speed speeds. Right, so a good example that I'm thinking is with Mando, the Mandalorian, Din Djarin's N1 starfighter. His starfighter is super fast, and we've seen a couple of times, like in the Book of Boba Fett, and in, I think, was it in Chapter 17 maybe, where he uses like the Nas booster version of whatever his thruster is that makes that thing, the modification that he and Peli made to his starship makes him go super, super fast. And people are like, hey, did he just jump to hyperspace? And no, he's using his sublight engines. So that's one type of engine. And then we've got hyperdrives, and the hyperdrives are going to be what allow the engines that allow a starship, a starfighter, to jump to hyperspace and travel at light speed. So those are the three different types of engines that we get in Star Wars. All right, so let's say I've got a starship and I want to take the engine from that starship and put it into a different one. My thought would be that, hey, I can do that, but to be able to install that engine into another starship, whatever ship I'm going to be putting that engine into, it's probably got to meet certain specifications to be able to effectively house that new engine, right? You probably can't take the engine of like a Starhopper or a small single-seated starship and then take that engine and put it into like a freighter or a hauler, right? Those are going to be larger types of starships. You probably can't take an engine from a smaller ship and put it into one of those types of starships. But my thought would be essentially, as long as the engine and the starship are compatible with one another, someone could do that. It would be difficult. It would be a complex task to complete, but it wouldn't be impossible. So one example of this is actually from, keep talking about Rebels tonight. I love it. So another example an example of this, I should say, comes from season 4 of Rebels. In this episode, which is called Flight of the wind up stealing the hyperdrive of a TIE Defender. And they plan to use that hyperdrive and install it in Ryder Azadi's U-Wing. And so they steal this hyperdrive, and then they take it back to where their base on Lothal is. They install the hyperdrive in Ryder Azadi's U-Wing, which then allowed Hera Syndulla and my boy Chopper to escape off-world. So that's definitely an example of that happening in canon. When I first got this question, I was like, yo, didn't they do this to Din's starfighter, his new N1 starfighter? They didn't. So I went back and watched the scene where they're working on Din's new starfighter, and they're getting it up to be able to fly again. And basically Peli's telling Din that, hey, we're going to do all these modifications, so it's going to be a badass starship, but they didn't put a new engine in it. It does look like you can see right here, it kind of looks like a new engine was put on it. But according to Peli, they just did some modifications. I wound up reading up on Din's starfighter. I couldn't find anything stating that they put in a new engine, but it would not shock me if we find out that Din's new N1 starfighter had a new engine put into it, which would be dope. I love his starfighter. I love how sleek it looks. I love that it's supposed to be like the Star Wars version of a muscle car. I'm not the biggest, like, I can get down with some starships in Star Wars. I'm not I don't go crazy for starships, but the ones that I do like, I'm really into. Din's I really enjoy. For whatever reason, I just think it looks so dope. And I love the fact that it calls back to the Phantom Menace. So, wouldn't shock me if we find out that this is a different type of engine that was put into Din's starfighter. But yeah, good question. I know we've seen examples of engines being repaired and pulling parts from one ship and putting it into another. I know we have. It took me a hot minute to come up with an example. I was like, oh my God, freaking Rebels. Perfect. Talking about Rebels already. This is great. Check. Having some technical difficulties with my mic. That's 2 weeks in a row. Damn. All right, I think we're back. We back, guys? Looks like my mic is back. All right, sorry about that. Son of a bee. 2 weeks in a row with this damn mic. But all right, we're back in business. So for our last question, Aaron Pandy asks, any chance of an Old Republic trilogy or even a mention of the Old Republic period in the Acolyte? I think it's more likely that we're going to see the Old Republic mentioned in the Acolyte rather than a trilogy being released that takes place during the Old Republic. Who knows? I could be wrong. We are apparently getting at Star Wars Celebration, there's apparently going to be an announcement about upcoming films for Star Wars that Lucasfilm has planned. It would surprise me if Lucasfilm was going to come out at Star Wars Celebration and say, yo, we're dropping an Old Republic trilogy. As much as I would love that, to see that on film, I feel like it's unlikely. And I say that because look how badly people lost their minds with the sequel trilogy, and the fact that the sequels did not specifically follow how things went in Legends continuity, which I've said this before on my streams and in my videos. Like I dabble with both canon and Legends. I like a lot of Legends stuff. The stuff that I feel like people lost their minds about with the sequel trilogy and not touching on certain things from Legends, I don't know. Some Legend stuff is so whack that it kills me that people, but everyone can like their whatever they like and have their own opinions. But anyway, I digress. The point I'm trying to make is that people absolutely went apeshit when Lucasfilm did not follow specifically what happened in Legends with the sequel trilogy. So now imagine if Lucasfilm was like, yo, we're going to make a Darth Revan film, or we're going to make a Knights of the Old Republic series of films. And then those films come out and they don't follow what happened in Knights of the Old Republic, or they don't follow what happened in the Knights of the Old Republic sequel game, or the Knights of the Old Republic comic series, or the Old Republic Revan novel. People would lose their goddamn minds. People would go apeshit. So because of that, I wouldn't fault Lucasfilm for being like, yeah, we're not going to touch the Old Republic. But I think because of how insane people went with the sequel trilogy, I think Lucasfilm is going to steer clear of the Old Republic, to be quite honest with you. I think that the announcement that we're probably getting at Celebration is probably going to be Lucasfilm saying, hey, we're going to be creating a film or a series of films that are going to be taking place during the High Republic. That seems much more likely to me, especially because we are getting so much content with the High Republic right now with books and comics. Oh my God, I just read the first comic for the new Yoda series, which it takes place during the High Republic, but you don't know specifically when during the High Republic. And it makes me so happy because I love the High Republic and I freaking love Yoda. So when I started reading that issue, I was like, oh my God, this is so awesome. So yeah, to me, it seems more likely that if we're going to get a series of films, or if we're going to get a film, it's probably going to take place during the High Republic. With that said, as much as I love the High Republic, I'm going to say that I'd rather we get a Disney Plus series or a film or a series of films that actually takes place during the Old Republic. I would prefer that over the High Republic. As much as I love the High Republic, the reason why I feel that way is because during the High Republic is taking place during the Rule of Sith era. So there's only 2 Sith. And at that point, they're operating in the shadows. The Jedi Order thinks the Sith are extinct. So if, let's say, we get a High Republic story where we may be introduced to some Sith Lords during that period, but they're going to be really operating from the shadows. It's going to be, and we're getting the Acolyte that is taking place at the end of the High Republic. And that is going to be kind of what we're going to be seeing in that series. It's going to be that cat and mouse of the Sith during that time period, basically working to corrupt the Republic and to topple the Jedi and to topple the Republic as well. I want to see on screen a time period when there are tons of Sith and there are tons of Jedi and they're at war with each other like we've seen in the Old Republic. That would be dope. Like I've mentioned on here before how I used to play Star Wars The Old Republic for years. And I'll never forget seeing the very first cinematic that was released for that game, where we get Darth Malgus and the Sith attacking the Jedi Temple. And they crash a starship into the Jedi Temple. And then the freaking Sith pour out of that starship and start fighting the Jedi. Dude, like I remember seeing that cinematic and just like jaw on the floor, like, holy shit, this is incredible. Now imagine seeing something like that on the big screen or on at home when you're watching something on Disney Plus. That would be so dope. So maybe my thought would be if we did get a film or a series that were to take place during the Old Republic, it would probably be about new characters that were not explored in previous Old Republic legend stories. You know, we could see stories that maybe do involve Darth Revan, because at this point in canon, it's only Darth Revan. He wasn't a Jedi. He was only a Sith. Maybe we get some information about Darth Revan, but he doesn't play. He's not doesn't take a primary role in that series or that film. And maybe we focus on a new Sith character or a new series of characters. That to me seems more likely. I think because of how fans reacted to The Last Jedi and reacted to the sequels, that Lucasfilm might be a little hesitant to dip their toes into an era that people have a lot of emotions towards, has spent a lot of time with in comics and novels, video games. So to me, it seems more likely that if we were to see the Old Republic or the Old Republic is going to be mentioned, I think it'd be more likely it's going to be mentioned in the Acolyte or mentioned in another type of project, rather than us getting an Old Republic film or an Old Republic trilogy. I would love an Old Republic trilogy, though. I think that'd be so dope. I love Knights of the Old Republic, and I was super excited when we were going to be getting the Knights of the Old Republic remake, which I think at this point it doesn't seem like that's happening, or if it is, it might be years away at this point. So I hope at some point Lucasfilm is going to dive back into that era. My biggest gripe with the Old Republic, and I know this is something that I've seen people talk about, is that like the technology is almost exactly the same during the Old Republic to when the story takes place in the Galactic Civil War, the Skywalker saga. The technology is almost identical. One of the things that I love about the High Republic is they have definitely showed there is a gap in technology from the High Republic to where we see the technology is in the prequels and beyond, which I appreciate because, as I said, as a fan that spent a lot of time enjoying the High Republic, one of my biggest gripes was, it's basically Star Wars. We're saying it's 1,000 years or however many thousands of years in the past, but for the most part, the technology is the same. So Bull Run says, does it matter? Does Lucasfilm actually care about fans though? Well, they're a corporation, I should say they're a subsidiary of a corporation, right? So what does any business care about at the end of the day? It's the bottom line, right? They're all about making money. They care about fans to the extent of, hey, if we create something, are fans going to enjoy it? Are fans going to consume it? I think that's probably the extent of how Disney and Lucasfilm views fans. So with that said, right, going back to that question, will fans consume it? Will fans like it? If they make a Darth Revan movie, I'm going to use Darth Revan again as an example. If they make a Darth Revan movie that does not adhere to Revan's story from Knights of the Old Republic and from the comics and the novel that we got, I think people would lose their minds. I think people would go absolutely bananas and would freak out. Just like they lost their minds with how Luke was portrayed, that Luke wasn't portrayed exactly how he was with Legends continuity. So I think Lucasfilm is 100% aware of that. I really do. So I don't know. We're about a month out from Star Wars Celebration. Maybe I'm going to be completely wrong, and maybe we're going to get that announcement that, we are 100%. Lucasfilm is making a film or a series of films that are going to take place in the High Republic. If so, I would happily eat crow because I would be so freaking pumped and so excited. What I would personally prefer would be, let's make films or series that takes place in the Old Republic, and we're gonna focus on different characters. That was my gripe. One of my big things with the sequel trilogy, even before the Phantom Menace, the Force Awakens premiered, I was like bummed that those films were going to include Leia, Han, and Luke. I wanted films that focused on new characters. I did not want to spend any more time focusing on Luke, Leia, or Han. Now, granted, I'm happy that we got those characters in the sequel trilogy. I'm happy that we've gotten new stories that feature those characters. But for me, whenever a new story is going to come out or we're going to be focusing on a new era, typically I'm like, let's get some new characters. Let's focus on some new characters. So I would actually prefer if a new Old Republic story is developed, if it's about new characters that we haven't met before. I think that would be a lot of fun, especially because the Old Republic is such a vast time period. I don't know the exact time dates off the top of my head, but you're talking about it spans thousands of years. So you could very easily be like, we're going to introduce this new character that is alive in 2000 BBY, so 2000 years before the Battle of Yavin, and they're going to reference Darth Revan because Revan was alive in like 3000 BBY. That would be dope. That would be so cool. But yeah, I have said this before on here. I would love if we got a Darth Bane series of films or a Darth Bane like show on Disney Plus. I would lose my mind. Dave Bautista is a big Star Wars fan. He played Jax, I should say, in Guardians of the Galaxy most famously. I'm trying to think. He was in what the heck is that? Rian Johnson, The Glass Onion. He was in that. He's a really good actor, and he has said like, hey, I portraying Darth Bane would be really cool. I feel like he'd be a perfect freaking Darth Bane. Tell me that dude would not be perfect as Darth Bane. Like, I would absolutely love that. Here I am saying like, hey, let's make stories about new characters. I don't want to focus on the same ones. I feel like Darth Bane's a little bit of a different scenario, even though we have gotten the Darth Bane novels. I would be like all about a Darth Bane series. So yeah, I would love an Old Republic series of films or shows, but I think it's going to be High Republic that we're probably going to get. But I do expect that in the Acolyte, the Old Republic's going to be mentioned, because I think the Acolyte is going to shed some light on the history of the Rule of Two and the Sith during that line, because there's a very large gap where we have no clue who the Sith were, from Darth Zana to Darth Tenebrous, Darth Plagueis' master. We have no clue who the Sith were. So you're talking about like 800-900 years of history. We have no clue in canon who the Sith were during that time period. So yeah, I think we're going to find out some information about, maybe not specifically the Old Republic, now that I say that, because technically Darth Bane created the Rule of Two after the fall of the Old Republic. So, but I think we're still going to get some information about Rule of Two era Sith. I think we're going to get some information about ancient Sith that were alive and were around during the Old Republic. I mentioned, keep bringing up Revan. I think it'd be so dope if during the Acolyte we hear Revan mentioned as a being that inspired Darth Bane to create the Rule of Two, because that's what happened in Legends. Although Darth Bane was inspired by the doctrine of the dyad in canon to create the Rule of Two, but you could still be like, yo, the doctrine of the dyad, that was something that Darth Revan was all about and preached. And you could very easily make that's who inspired Darth Bane to create the Rule of Two, because of Revan's doctrine of the dyad. There you go, Lucasfilm. That's a freebie for you. That you could do it so easily. So yeah, I would love if we get stuff like that in the Acolyte. So Bullrun disagreeing with me a bunch tonight. So I disagree that there's going to be High Republic movies, but that's just me. Hey, as I mentioned, I hope, I'd rather we get movies about the Old Republic. So I hope that I'm wrong, to be quite honest with you. I hope we're not getting any movies. I don't think we will. I really hope we're not getting any more movies that take place during the Skywalker saga era. I don't want any more Jedi movies that take place. Yeah, I say that now, but like if it's announced, I'll be like, oh, absolutely, I'll watch it. You know, I would prefer, hey, let's get some stories about the Sith and the Jedi that take place before or after the Star Wars saga. That would be my preference. And Bullrun says I'd rather have some games, bro. I'm like definitely jonesing for Star Wars games. I cannot wait for Jedi Survivor to come out. It was supposed to come out in April and it's got pushed back. Is it to June? I think it's June. I might be wrong though, but it was pushed back a little bit. But at least we're getting that soon. So hopefully we get some other Star Wars games as well. All right, guys. That's all the time I got for questions. That's all the questions I've got for you. I love doing the Q&A, and I'm thinking, my thought is, I've been kind of going back and forth the last couple of weeks doing them on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I am going to try. It's difficult sometimes with my work schedule, but I'm going to try to keep them to Tuesday nights, because I want to be able, I'm hoping that you guys start sending me Mandalorian questions so we could talk about the Mandalorian, as well as Bad Batch questions. We could talk about the freaking Jesus Christ, the Bad Batch episode was insane yesterday. It was so good. So yeah, I want more Mandalorian questions. I want more Bad Batch questions. I love this stuff. But yeah, I think I'm gonna start trying to really keep the Q&A to Tuesdays, so that I could answer any questions you guys send my way about the Bad Batch and the Mandalorian. I'm going to try to. I can't promise, because my work schedule can sometimes be crazy, but I'm thinking Tuesdays. I'm going to try to keep it to Tuesdays. So with that said, let me know down in the comments, is there anything that you agreed with that I discussed in the Q&A today? Is there anything you're like, this guy's a jive-ass turkey? Let me know down in the comments. I love to hear your thoughts on Star Wars. I love having conversations about Star Wars. So let me know your thoughts on any of the questions we've discussed today down in the comments. Now's a good time. Like this video, subscribe to Star Wars Transmissions if you haven't. It helps out the channel a bunch, so I would greatly appreciate it. And then if you have TikTok, follow the channel on TikTok at SW Transmissions. We're going to be breaking down The Mandalorian each week. I think Danielle and I were talking about it. We're probably going to do on Wednesdays. Our streams are probably going to be diving into primarily Mandalorian, but we'll also talk about The Bad Batch as well. Videos dropping regularly, shorts dropping pretty much every day at this point. So keep your eyes peeled for a bunch of really good stuff from Star Wars Transmissions. I'm going to go watch freaking some hockey. I'm going to go watch my blue shirts, the New York Rangers. Hopefully they're winning. They were winning before I started the stream, so hopefully they're still winning. So I'm going to go enjoy me some hockey. So you guys have a great night. May the Force be with you and stay nerdy.